Where'd you get this uniform from? Officer, I'm active duty special forces. That's my military ID. Anybody can dress. I'm a major. I'm not resisting.
At 2:47 p.m. inside a Walmart supercenter in Fayetteville, North Carolina, two white police officers deployed pepper spray directly into the face of a black man wearing full U.S. Army dress greens. The man was Major Langston Beaumont, an active-duty Special Forces officer with more than 12 years of combat and counterterrorism service. The officers who put their hands on him, Garrett Pritchard and his partner Wade Sutherland, had already decided based on his skin color and their own bias that he didn't fit the image of a legitimate officer. One of them would later be heard on body cam saying, "He doesn't look like any officer I've ever seen. Probably bought that uniform online." 18 minutes later, the Secretary of Defense was on a secure call. The Pentagon's Inspector General was being briefed, and two police careers were about to end under the weight of what those two officers had done in front of families shopping for groceries. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because the next story is one you don't want to miss. Officer Garrett Pritchard was 37 years old and had been with the Fayetteville Police Department for almost 11 years. He was known among some supervisors as by the book, a label that in his case meant rigid thinking, selective enforcement, and a pattern of questioning the credentials of minority service members that had quietly accumulated in his personnel file. Store managers had flagged him twice for what they called overly aggressive interactions with black customers. A training sergeant had noted in an eval that Pritchard struggles with de-escalation when his authority is challenged. That afternoon, Pritchard stood near the electronics section in a pressed Navy uniform, notebook clipped to his belt, radio mic on his shoulder, scanning the weekend shoppers drifting past. Parents with children, elderly couples, college students, and a small number of service members in various uniforms picking up last-minute items near Fort Bragg. His partner, Officer Wade Sutherland, 32, 3 years on the job, stayed close beside him. Sutherland rarely questioned Pritchard's judgment. He nodded at the same suspicions, backed the same stops, and followed Pritchard's instincts without hesitation. Pritchard's attention fixed on one shopper in particular. Major Langston Beaumont, 34, walked down the toy aisle in full Army dress greens, shopping basket in his left hand, phone in his right. His posture was military straight, his movements deliberate. The ribbons on his chest included a Bronze Star with Valor device, an Afghanistan campaign medal, and a combat infantryman badge. He had spent most of his adult life in the 3rd Special Forces Group, rotating between Fort Bragg, overseas deployments to Syria and Afghanistan, and brief windows at home with his wife and daughter. He was in uniform because he had just left a promotion ceremony at the base and was picking up supplies for his daughter Amara's 7th birthday party later that evening. He had exactly 90 minutes before guests arrived. As Beaumont reached for a doll on the shelf, Pritchard shifted his weight forward. "Excuse me, you in the Army uniform. I need to speak with you." Beaumont turned, basket still in hand, and met his eyes. "Yes, officer, how can I help you?" Pritchard's gaze moved slowly across the dress greens, the ribbons, the rank insignia, the Special Forces tab above the unit patch. "That your uniform?" "Yes, sir." "Put the basket down." At 2:47 p.m. inside a Walmart supercenter in Fayetteville, North Carolina, two white police officers deployed pepper spray directly into the face of a black man wearing full U.S. Army dress greens. The man was Major Langston Beaumont, an active-duty Special Forces officer with more than 12 years of combat and counterterrorism service. The officers who put their hands on him, Garrett Pritchard and his partner Wade Sutherland, had already decided based on his skin color and their own bias that he didn't fit the image of a legitimate officer. One of them would later be heard on body cam saying, "He doesn't look like any officer I've ever seen. Probably bought that uniform online." 18 minutes later, the Secretary of Defense was on a secure call. The Pentagon's Inspector General was being briefed, and two police careers were about to end under the weight of what those two officers had done in front of families shopping for groceries. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because the next story is one you don't want to miss. Officer Garrett Pritchard was 37 years old and had been with the Fayetteville Police Department for almost 11 years. He was known among some supervisors as by the book, a label that in his case meant rigid thinking, selective enforcement, and a pattern of questioning the credentials of minority service members that had quietly accumulated in his personnel file. Store managers had flagged him twice for what they called overly aggressive interactions with black customers. A training sergeant had noted in an eval that Pritchard struggles with de-escalation when his authority is challenged. That afternoon, Pritchard stood near the electronics section in a pressed Navy uniform, notebook clipped to his belt, radio mic on his shoulder, scanning the weekend shoppers drifting past. Parents with children, elderly couples, college students, and a small number of service members in various uniforms picking up last-minute items near Fort Bragg. His partner, Officer Wade Sutherland, 32, 3 years on the job, stayed close beside him. Sutherland rarely questioned Pritchard's judgment. He nodded at the same suspicions, backed the same stops, and followed Pritchard's instincts without hesitation. Pritchard's attention fixed on one shopper in particular. Major Langston Beaumont, 34, walked down the toy aisle in full army dress greens, shopping basket in his left hand, phone in his right. His posture was military straight, his movements deliberate. The ribbons on his chest included a bronze star with Valor device, an Afghanistan campaign medal, and a combat infantryman badge. He had spent most of his adult life in the 3rd Special Forces Group, rotating between Fort Bragg, overseas deployments to Syria and Afghanistan, and brief windows at home with his wife and daughter. He was in uniform because he had just left a promotion ceremony at the base and was picking up supplies for his daughter Amara's 7th birthday party later that evening. He had exactly 90 minutes before guests arrived. As Beaumont reached for a doll on the shelf, Pritchard shifted his weight forward. "Excuse me, you in the army uniform. I need to speak with you." Beaumont turned, basket still in hand, and met his eyes. "Yes, officer, how can I help you?" Pritchard's gaze moved slowly across the dress greens, the ribbons, the rank insignia, the Special Forces tab above the unit patch. "That's your uniform?" "Yes, sir." "Put the basket down." Beaumont's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He had been stopped before, twice in airports, once outside a restaurant in Atlanta while waiting for his wife. Each time, the question came wrapped in the same tone, the same disbelief, the same unspoken accusation that someone who looked like him didn't belong in that uniform. He set the basket on the floor gently, keeping his hands visible. "Is there a problem, officer?" Pritchard stepped closer, close enough that a mother with 2 children in a shopping cart slowed her pace and glanced over. Sutherland moved to Beaumont's left, creating an L-shaped formation that any trained operator would recognize as a containment position. "I'm going to need to see some ID," Pritchard said. "Of course." Beaumont's voice remained calm, professional. He reached slowly toward his inside jacket pocket. "I have my military ID and my—" Whoa, Pritchard's hand dropped to his pepper spray canister. "Slow down, what are you reaching for?" Beaumont froze, hand hovering an inch from his pocket. Around them, the ambient noise of the store seemed to drop. A teenage employee stocking shelves stopped mid-motion. An elderly man in a veteran's ball cap turned fully toward the scene. "My identification, sir," Beaumont said, each word measured. "You asked for ID. It's in my inside jacket pocket. Would you like me to retrieve it, or would you prefer to retrieve it yourself?" The question hung in the air. Pritchard's eyes narrowed. In his mind, this was defiance. This was a suspect trying to control the interaction, trying to tell him how to do his job. What Pritchard didn't know, what he couldn't know because he'd never served a day in uniform, was that Beaumont's phrasing was textbook military de-escalation. It was the language of a man trained to operate in hostile environments, a man who understood that the wrong move, the wrong word, could turn a tense moment into a fatal one. "Real slow," Pritchard said, 2 fingers. Beaumont complied. He pulled out a black leather ID holder using only his thumb and index finger, then extended it toward Pritchard at arm's length. Pritchard snatched it, flipped it open, and stared at the common access card inside. the holographic seal, the embedded chip, the photograph that clearly matched the man standing in front of him. The rank, Major 04. The unit, 3rd Special Forces Group, Airborne. For 3 full seconds, Pritchard said nothing. Sutherland leaned in to look, then stepped back. "This could be fake," Pritchard said finally. Beaumont blinked once, twice. "I'm sorry, what?" "I said this could be fake." Pritchard's voice rose slightly. "You know how many people we catch with fake military IDs, fake uniforms?" "Officer, that is a Department of Defense Common Access card. It has a chip, biometric data, and a holographic." "I know what it is," Pritchard snapped. "I'm saying I don't know if it's real. Where'd you get this uniform?" The question landed like a slap. Beaumont felt heat rise in his chest, a flash of anger he immediately suppressed. He had earned that uniform, he had bled for it, he had watched teammates die wearing it, and now he was standing in a Walmart toy aisle being accused of playing dress-up. "I earned this uniform through 12 years of active service," Beaumont said, his voice dropping to a colder, harder register. "I am currently assigned to 3rd Special Forces Group at Fort Bragg. If you have questions about my credentials, I can provide you with my command's direct number, and they will verify my identity within 60 seconds. Pritchard's face flushed red. "Are you telling me how to do my job?" "I'm offering to resolve your concern through proper channels." "You're giving me attitude, is what you're doing." Sutherland shifted his weight, hand now also resting on his pepper spray. A woman pushing a cart with a toddler stopped at the end of the aisle, sensing the tension, and quickly reversed direction. The teenage employee pulled out his phone. "Sir, I'm not giving you attitude," Beaumont said. "I'm complying with your request for identification. I've provided my military ID. I've offered contact information for verification. What else do you need from me?" Pritchard stepped even closer, now within 2 feet of Beaumont's face. "What I need is for you to stop talking and start listening. You think because you're wearing that costume, you can talk to me however you want." "Costume." The word detonated in the space between them. Beaumont's hands, which had remained at his sides, curled into fists, not raised, not threatening, just tight, a physical response to a psychological assault, and Pritchard saw it. "You getting aggressive with me?" Pritchard's hand closed around the pepper spray canister. "You making fists at a police officer?" "My hands are at my sides," Beaumont said through clenched teeth. "I have not made a single aggressive movement." "Wade, you see him making fists?" Sutherland nodded. "Yeah, I see it." It was a lie, a coordinated, deliberate lie, and both officers knew it. But it was also a setup, a justification for what was about to happen next. Beaumont knew it too. He had seen this script before, in training scenarios, in intelligence briefings about domestic threats, in the warnings his father had given him before he ever put on the uniform. They will look for a reason. Do not give them one. "Officer, I am not being aggressive," Beaumont said, forcing his voice into a tone of absolute neutrality. "I am a field-grade officer in the United States Army. I am on my way to my daughter's birthday party. I have complied with every instruction you've given. Please tell me what you need me to do." Pritchard pulled the pepper spray from his belt. The teenage employee's phone was now recording. 20 feet away, a woman in civilian clothes, blonde, mid-40s, athletic build, stopped mid-stride. Her eyes locked onto Beaumont's unit patch. 3rd Special Forces Group. She knew that patch. She had prosecuted cases for soldiers in that unit. Colonel Patricia Voss, off-duty, still in her civilian shopping clothes, watched the 2 officers corner a man she didn't know personally, but whose rank and unit she recognized instantly. "Officer, there's no need for that," Beaumont said, eyes on the pepper spray canister. "I'm unarmed, I'm compliant, I'm not resisting." "That your real name on this ID?" Pritchard demanded. "Langston Beaumont." "Yes, sir." "You got any other ID, driver's license, passport?" "In my wallet, back pocket." "Get it out." Beaumont moved slowly, telegraphing every motion. He pulled out a brown leather wallet, extracted his North Carolina driver's license, and handed it over. Pritchard barely glanced at it. "This doesn't prove anything," Pritchard said. "Any of this could be fake." "Then call my command," Beaumont said, his patience fracturing at the edges. "The number is on the back of my CAC. You can verify my identity in less than 2 minutes. I don't take orders from you. I'm not giving you an order. I'm trying to help you do your job." "My job," Pritchard said, his voice now loud enough that heads were turning throughout the store, "is to investigate suspicious activity. And you, in that uniform in this store, acting like you own the place, that's suspicious." The accusation was so absurd, so transparently pretextual, that Beaumont almost laughed. Almost, but he didn't, because he knew laughing would be interpreted as disrespect. Disrespect would be interpreted as aggression, and aggression would give Pritchard exactly what he was looking for. "Officer Pritchard," Beaumont said, reading the nameplate on the uniform, "I don't know what I've done to make you suspicious, but I assure you I am exactly who I say I am. If you want to detain me, detain me. If you want to arrest me, arrest me. But please tell me what law I've broken." The question was a mistake. Pritchard's face twisted into something ugly. "You're interfering with an investigation." "What investigation?" "This one." It was circular logic, the kind of Kafkaesque reasoning that Beaumont had seen used against detainees overseas, and now it was being used against him in his own country, in his own uniform, while shopping for his daughter's birthday. "Officer, I want to be very clear," Beaumont said, his voice now carrying the command authority of a man used to leading soldiers in combat. "I am Major Langston Beaumont. I am an active duty Special Forces officer. I have provided you with valid identification. I have offered verification through my chain of command. I have complied with every lawful order you've given. If you proceed beyond this point without cause, you are violating my civil rights and potentially committing a federal offense against a commissioned officer of the United States Army." Pritchard's hand tightened on the pepper spray. "You threatening me?" "I'm informing you of the law." "Sounds like a threat to me, Wade." "Definitely sounded like a threat," Sutherland said. Colonel Voss, still watching from 20 feet away, pulled out her phone. She opened Facebook Live. The stream went active. 0 viewers, then 1, then 7. "Last chance," Pritchard said. "Stop resisting or I'm going to take you down." "I'm not resisting," Beaumont said. "I'm standing still. My hands are visible. I'm not resisting." "You're arguing, that's resisting." "That's not what resisting means." "He's still resisting," Pritchard shouted, now performing for an invisible audience. Get on the ground now." Beaumont didn't move, not because he was defiant, but because he knew what would happen next. If he dropped to the ground voluntarily, they would claim he was being aggressive, moving too fast, reaching for something. If he stayed still, they would claim he was resisting. There was no right answer. The script had already been written. "I'm asking you one more time, please," Beaumont said, and there was something almost pleading in his voice now, a recognition that this was spiraling beyond reason. "Call my command. Verify who I am. That's all I'm asking." Pritchard raised the pepper spray canister to eye level. "Get on the ground, or I will deploy chemical agents." A woman screamed. Children started crying. Colonel Voss's livestream viewer count hit 43. Beaumont raised his hands slowly, palms out, in the universal gesture of surrender. "Don't do this," he said quietly. Pritchard squeezed the trigger. The orange stream hit Beaumont directly in the face, eyes, nose, mouth. The effect was instantaneous. His hands flew to his face. He gasped, choked, stumbled backward into a display of stuffed animals. The pain was blinding, searing, a chemical fire that ignited every nerve ending in his face. He dropped to one knee, trying to breathe, trying to see, trying to process what had just happened. Sutherland moved in. Grabbing Beaumont's left arm, wrenching it behind his back, Pritchard grabbed the right. They drove him face first into the floor, his chest slamming into the tile with a sound that echoed through the store like a gunshot. Someone screamed again. Multiple phones were recording now. Colonel Voss's livestream viewer count hit 127. "Stop resisting," Pritchard yelled, even though Beaumont's hands were pinned, his face pressed into the floor, his eyes streaming, his lungs seizing. I'm not, Beaumont tried to speak, but the pepper spray had infiltrated his throat. He coughed, gagged, unable to finish the sentence. Pritchard deployed a second burst of spray, this time directly into the back of Beaumont's head at point-blank range. The store manager, a young woman named Yuki Nakamura, ran toward the scene, her radio in hand. "Officers, stop. He's a customer. He hasn't done anything." "Ma'am, step back," Sutherland barked. "This is a police matter." "He's shopping. He's been here for 10 minutes. I watched him walk in." "He's resisting arrest." "For what?" Yuki's voice cracked. "What is he under arrest for?" Neither officer answered. They didn't have an answer, not a real one, not one that would survive scrutiny. But in that moment, on that floor, with 17 people recording and a live stream climbing past 300 viewers, they didn't think they needed one. Beaumont's face pressed against the cold tile, tasted blood. The pepper spray had caused him to bite his own tongue. His dress uniform, the one he'd worn with pride just 2 hours earlier while receiving his promotion certificate, was now smeared with chemical residue and dust from the floor. His ribbons, each one representing sacrifice, service, moments of courage under fire, were crushed beneath his own weight as two men who had never served a day in uniform held him down like a criminal. And then, through the haze of pain and humiliation, Beaumont heard a voice, clear, authoritative, female. "This is Colonel Patricia Voss, United States Army Judge Advocate General's Corps. I am live streaming this incident. This is an active assault on a field-grade officer. I am a witness. The officer's name is Major Langston Beaumont, 3rd Special Forces Group, Fort Bragg. I recognize his unit patch and rank insignia. These officers have assaulted an active-duty commissioned officer without cause. This is a federal crime." The live stream viewer count hit 1,200. Pritchard's head snapped up. He saw the woman, saw the phone, saw the red recording light. "Ma'am, turn that off and step back." "I will not. I am a military officer, and I am documenting a federal assault." Sutherland looked at Pritchard. "Garrett, we need to." "Shut up," Pritchard hissed. Then louder, "Ma'am, final warning. Turn off that phone or you'll be arrested for obstruction." Colonel Voss didn't move. "My name is Colonel Patricia Voss. My JAG office is at Fort Bragg. I am currently live streaming to 1,400 viewers. If you arrest me, you will be adding another federal charge to your already catastrophic situation." Pritchard's radio crackled. "Dispatch, Unit 47, what's your status? We're getting multiple 911 calls about an incident at Walmart on Bragg Boulevard." Pritchard didn't respond. He was staring at the phone, at the live viewer count, at the growing crowd of witnesses, at the reality that was setting in. This wasn't going to go away. Beaumont, still on the ground, managed to turn his head slightly. Through swollen, burning eyes, he saw the woman with the phone, saw her uniform bearing and her steady hand, and he understood. She knew. She recognized him. She was documenting this. The chain of command was about to be activated. "Officers," Beaumont said, his voice ragged but clear, "you are currently assaulting a commissioned officer of the United States Army. This incident is being recorded by multiple witnesses and is being live-streamed. I strongly advise you to release me immediately and request supervisory presence." It was the last thing he said, before his vision blurred completely. Pritchard's radio crackled again. "Unit 47, respond. Chief is asking for immediate status update." This time Pritchard keyed his mic. His voice was different now, uncertain. "Dispatch 47, we've detained a subject at Walmart for investigation of stolen valor." Even as he said it, he knew it sounded hollow. Colonel Voss's livestream viewer count hit 4,200. And inside the Pentagon, 287 miles north, a junior officer monitoring social media flagged a video titled, "Police Assault Special Forces Major in Walmart." The notification reached the office of the Secretary of Defense in less than 6 minutes. The clock had started. What most people didn't know about Officer Garrett Pritchard was that his phone had a folder, not in his camera roll, not in his messages, in a private Facebook group called Valor Guardians. 847 members, most of them cops, retired military security guards. The group's stated purpose was to expose stolen valor, people pretending to be veterans for sympathy, discounts, or street credibility. But the real purpose, the one visible in the comment sections and the shared videos, was something darker. It was rage dressed up as patriotism. It was suspicion weaponized against anyone who didn't fit their narrow image of what a service member should look like. Pritchard had joined 3 years ago. He'd posted 43 times, videos of confrontations mostly, him questioning people in uniform at gas stations, airports, restaurants, exposing fakes, he called it. The comment sections praised him, called him a hero, told him to keep fighting the good fight. What they didn't mention was that 41 of his 43 targets were people of color. Personnel file told a parallel story. 3 excessive force complaints in 8 years, all investigated, all cleared. The first involved a 19-year-old black college student accused of shoplifting. Pritchard had used a chokehold. The charges were dropped. The complaint was filed by the student's mother. Internal Affairs found no policy violation. The second complaint came from a Hispanic man during a traffic stop. Pritchard had deployed his taser after the man allegedly made a fist. Witnesses said the man was reaching for his registration. The complaint was sustained, but resulted in no discipline beyond counseling. The third complaint came from a fellow officer, a black woman who reported that Pritchard made racially charged comments during roll call. That complaint disappeared into administrative limbo and was never formally resolved. His supervisor, Sergeant Raymond Delvecchio, had written in Pritchard's last performance review, "Officer Pritchard demonstrates strong instincts, but would benefit from enhanced de-escalation training and cultural sensitivity coursework." Translation: he's too aggressive and he's got a problem with minorities, but we're not going to do anything about it. That's who was standing in the Walmart toy aisle at 2:47 p.m., hand on his pepper spray, staring at Major Langston Beaumont like he'd just spotted a fraud. Pritchard didn't see the Bronze Star. He didn't see the Combat Infantryman badge. He didn't see a man who had led teams through firefights in Helmand Province and counter-terrorism operations in Syria. He saw a black man in a costume, and in Pritchard's world, that was all the probable cause he needed. "That your uniform, or you just playing dress-up?" Pritchard said, stepping closer. Beaumont's jaw tightened. The question wasn't new. It was a script he'd heard before, in different cities, in different contexts, from different men who all wore the same expression of disbelief. But this time felt different. This time, the officer's hand was already on his pepper spray before the conversation even started. "It's my uniform," Beaumont said evenly. "I'm active duty. Is there something I can help you with?" Pritchard's eyes narrowed. The politeness felt like mockery to him, like defiance wrapped in manners. "Yeah, you can help me by showing some ID. Real ID, not some fake card you printed off the internet." Sutherland shifted closer, boxing Beaumont in from the left. 2 other shoppers slowed, sensing the tension. A mother pulled her son closer and whispered, "Keep walking." Beaumont's training kicked in, hands visible, voice calm, no sudden movements. He was operating now, running the same mental checklist he'd run 100 times in hostile territory. Assess the threat, control your breathing, don't escalate. "Officer, I have my military ID, my driver's license, and my CAC, my common access card. I'm happy to provide all of them. I can also give you my command's direct number if you'd like to verify my credentials." Pritchard smirked. "Oh, I'm sure you've got a whole story worked out. Guys like you always do." "Guys like you." The words landed like a slap. Beaumont's hands curled into fists at his sides, not raised, not threatening, just tight. A physical response he couldn't fully suppress, and Pritchard saw it. His smirk widened. "You getting upset? You got a problem with a lawful police investigation." "I don't have a problem with anything," Beaumont said, forcing his hands open. "I'm complying with your request. Would you like to see my identification now, or would you prefer to continue this conversation?" It was the wrong tone, too controlled, too articulate. In Pritchard's mind, real soldiers didn't talk like that. Real soldiers were deferential, respectful. They said yes, sir, and no, sir, and didn't ask questions. Real soldiers, in Pritchard's imagination, looked like the men in the Valor Guardians Facebook group. They didn't look like Langston Beaumont. Pritchard pulled the pepper spray from his belt. "I'm gonna need you to put your hands behind your head, right now." Beaumont froze. Around them, the store seemed to hold its breath. The teenage employee's phone came up, recording. An elderly veteran in a ball cap stopped his cart, watching. Colonel Patricia Voss, still 20 feet away, felt her pulse quicken as she recognized the unit patch on Beaumont's sleeve. "Officer," Beaumont said slowly, "I haven't done anything wrong. I'm shopping. I'm a customer. I'm in uniform because I just came from a promotion ceremony at Fort Bragg, and I'm on my way to my daughter's birthday party. I don't understand what's happening right now." "Hands behind your head." Beaumont raised his hands slowly, palms out, fingers spread. Surrender, submission, compliance, everything his training said to do, everything his father had warned him about, everything that still, somehow, wasn't enough. And then Pritchard said the words that would cost him everything. "That uniform doesn't make you special. It just makes you a liar in a costume." Colonel Voss hit the red button on her phone. The live stream went active, and the clock started ticking toward a reckoning neither Pritchard nor Sutherland could see coming. Beaumont's hands were still raised, palms out, when he made his final attempt at reason. "Officer Pritchard," he said, reading the nameplate, keeping his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "I'm going to reach into my inside jacket pocket. Slowly, I'm retrieving my military identification, my common access card, and my driver's license. Is that acceptable?" Pritchard's grip tightened on the pepper spray canister. Real slow, 2 fingers only. Beaumont complied. He used his thumb and index finger to extract a black leather ID holder from his dress uniform jacket. The movement was deliberate, telegraphed, visible to everyone watching. He extended his arm fully, offering the ID holder at a safe distance. Pritchard snatched it from his hand. Inside was everything Beaumont had promised: a North Carolina driver's license, a military ID card with Beaumont's photo, rank, and service dates, and most importantly, a common access card, the chipped, holographically sealed credential issued only by the Department of Defense to active duty personnel with security clearances. Pritchard stared at the CAC for 5 full seconds. The holographic image shifted in the light, the embedded chip gleamed. The photograph was unmistakably the man standing in front of him. Rank, Major, 04, Unit, 3rd Special Forces Group, Airborne. Expiration date, 18 months from now. Sutherland leaned in, looked at the card, then looked at Pritchard. For a brief moment, there was a flicker of uncertainty in Pritchard's eyes. A recognition that maybe, possibly, he'd made a mistake, that the man in front of him might actually be exactly who he claimed to be. Then his pride overrode his judgment. "This could be fake," Pritchard said, loud enough for the growing crowd to hear. "You know how good these forgeries are getting? I've seen fake CACs before. They're all over the internet." Beaumont's composure cracked just slightly. "Officer, that is not fake. It has an embedded chip. It has biometric encoding. It is linked directly to the Defense Enrollment Eligibility Reporting System. If you have any doubt whatsoever, I am offering right now to give you my command's phone number. Call them. They will verify my identity in less than 60 seconds. Pritchard shook his head. "I don't take instructions from suspects." "I'm not a suspect. I'm a customer. I'm a commissioned officer in the United States Army. I haven't committed a crime. I haven't broken any laws. What is happening right now?" Pritchard's face flushed red. The question felt like insubordination, like a challenge to his authority. And in that moment, with a crowd watching, with his partner beside him, with his ego on the line, Garrett Pritchard made a choice. He raised the pepper spray canister to eye level. "Final warning, get on the ground, now." "For what?" Beaumont's voice rose, frustration finally breaking through. "For shopping, for being black in uniform. What am I being detained for?" "Resisting investigation." "I've answered every question. I've provided identification. I've offered verification. I'm not resisting anything. Get on the ground. Beaumont didn't move, not because he was defiant, but because he understood the trap. If he dropped to the floor, they'd say he moved aggressively. If he stayed still, they'd say he was resisting. There was no right answer. The script was already written. Around them, phones came up. 1, 3, 7, 11, 17 phones, all recording. The teenage employee, the elderly veteran, a mother with her phone tucked behind her purse, a college student filming from behind a display, a store employee crouched near the checkout lanes. Pritchard saw them, all of them, and instead of pausing, instead of reconsidering, he doubled down. He squeezed the trigger. The orange chemical stream hit Beaumont directly in the face. Eyes, nose, mouth. The reaction was instantaneous and brutal. Beaumont's hands flew to his face reflexively. He gasped, choked, stumbled backward. The pain was white-hot, searing, blinding. Every instinct in his body screamed to fight, to flee, to do something, but his training overrode instinct. He dropped to one knee, trying to breathe, trying to see through the chemical fire consuming his face. Sutherland moved in fast, grabbing Beaumont's left arm. Pritchard grabbed the right. Together, they wrenched both arms behind his back and drove him face-first into the tile floor. The impact echoed through the store like a gunshot. Beaumont's chest slammed into the ground. His dress uniform, immaculate 2 minutes ago, was now smeared with chemical residue and floor dust. His ribbons, each one representing blood and sacrifice, were crushed beneath his own body weight. Someone screamed. Children started crying. Yuki Nakamura, the store manager, ran toward them, her radio in hand. "Officers, stop. He's a customer. He hasn't done anything." "Ma'am, step back," Sutherland barked. "This is police business." "He's been shopping. I watched him walk in 10 minutes ago. What is he under arrest for?" Neither officer answered. Pritchard deployed a second burst of pepper spray, this time directly into the back of Beaumont's head at point-blank range. The chemical cloud expanded, drifting into the surrounding air. A child in a nearby cart started coughing. His mother pulled him away, furious and terrified. "Stop resisting," Pritchard yelled, even though Beaumont's face was pressed into the floor, his arms pinned, his body immobilized. "I'm not," Beaumont managed to gasp between coughs. He couldn't finish the sentence. The pepper spray had infiltrated his throat, his lungs. He tasted blood where he'd bitten his own tongue on impact. And then, cutting through the chaos, a voice rang out, clear, authoritative, female. "This is Colonel Patricia Voss, United States Army Judge Advocate General's Corps." Pritchard's head snapped up. 20 feet away, a blonde woman in civilian clothes stood with her phone raised, the red recording light clearly visible. "I am live-streaming this incident," Colonel Voss continued, her voice steady and prosecutorial. "This is an active assault on a field-grade officer. I am a witness. The victim's name is Major Langston Beaumont, 3rd Special Forces Group, Fort Bragg. I recognize his unit patch and his rank insignia. These officers have just deployed chemical weapons against an active-duty commissioned officer without provocation. This is a federal crime under Title 18, U.S. Code, Section 242. I am documenting this assault in real time." Pritchard froze. "Ma'am, turn off that phone and step back." "I will not. I am a military officer. I am a witness to a federal assault. My live stream currently has 1,847 viewers and counting." Sutherland looked at Pritchard, panic creeping into his eyes. "Garrett, we need to." "Shut up," Pritchard hissed. But it was too late. The damage was done. The video was live. And 287 miles north, in a Pentagon office monitoring social media threats. A junior intelligence analyst named Captain Jerome Mills saw a notification pop up on his screen. Trending, police assault Army officer in Walmart, 6,200 shares in 4 minutes. He clicked the link. He watched for 11 seconds. Then he picked up a red phone that connected directly to the office of the Secretary of Defense. The call was answered on the first ring. Colonel Patricia Voss had prosecuted 47 cases in her 16-year career as a judge advocate general officer. She had seen evidence destroyed, witnesses intimidated, and chains of command protect the guilty. She had learned, the hard way, that documentation was everything. That's why her phone was already recording before she even announced herself. That's why she'd opened Facebook Live instead of just her camera app. Because a video on a phone could be seized, deleted, lost in evidence. But a live stream was already out there, replicating across servers, being screen recorded by strangers, impossible to contain. Viewer count hit 3,100. For those just joining, Voss said, narrating in real time like a courtroom prosecutor presenting evidence, I am witnessing two police officers. She zoomed in on their nameplates, Officer Garrett Pritchard and Officer Wade Sutherland of the Fayetteville Police Department, assaulting Major Langston Beaumont. The Major is face down on the floor. He has been pepper sprayed twice. I watched the entire interaction. The Major was compliant. He provided military identification. He offered contact information for his chain of command. The officers ignored all of it and deployed chemical weapons. She turned the camera to show the crowd. 17 people, all recording. She turned it back to Beaumont, still pinned to the floor, his face pressed against tile, his dress uniform now stained and wrinkled. The Major is wearing full dress greens with a 3rd Special Forces Group combat patch. That's an elite unit. Those ribbons include a bronze star with Valor device. This is not stolen valor. This is an American hero being treated like a criminal for shopping while black. Viewer count 5,400. Pritchard's radio crackled. Unit 47, we're getting multiple 911 calls about your location. Chief wants immediate status. Pritchard keyed his mic, his voice tight. Dispatch 47, we've detained a subject for investigation of stolen valor. Subject became combative. Chemical agents were deployed. Situation is under control. Every word was a lie, and 17 phones were recording the proof. Voss spoke directly to her phone. I just heard Officer Pritchard claim the subject became combative. That is false. I watched the entire encounter. Major Beaumont never raised his voice above normal conversation until after he was sprayed. He never made physical contact with the officers. He never assumed a fighting stance. This is a false police report being made in real time, and I am documenting it. Viewer count 8,900 in the comments section of the live stream. The reactions were pouring in. Someone call Fort Bragg right now. This is a federal case. Those cops just ended their careers. I'm a veteran and this is making me sick. Share this everywhere, and people were sharing. The video was being screen recorded, clipped, and reposted to Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Multiple clips were already going viral independently. One with the caption, they pepper sprayed a decorated green beret for shopping. Another, this is what happens when you wear the uniform while black. At 2:54 p.m., exactly 7 minutes after the first spray, a retired Army Sergeant Major named Marcus Clay, watching the live stream from his home in Virginia, picked up his phone and called a number he hadn't dialed in 3 years. It rang twice. Provost Marshal's office, Fort Bragg, Sergeant Dyers speaking. Sergeant, this is retired Sergeant Major Marcus Clay. I need to speak to the Provost Marshal immediately. I'm watching a live stream of 2 civilian police officers assaulting one of your majors. His name is Langston Beaumont, 3rd Group. This is happening right now at the Walmart on Bragg Boulevard. There was a pause. Sir, can you send me the link? Clay sent it. Sergeant Dyers opened the link, watched for 15 seconds, then stood up so fast his chair rolled backward into the wall. Sir, stay on the line, he ran. By the time he reached the Provost Marshal's office, the live stream viewer count had hit 14,200. By the time Colonel James Pritchett, Fort Bragg's Provost Marshal, opened the link on his desktop, it was 19,600. By the time he picked up his phone to call the Chief of Staff, it was 27,000. The call lasted 45 seconds. At 3:01 p.m., 8 minutes after the assault began, the Chief of Staff at Fort Bragg called the Pentagon. At 3:03 p.m., a senior aide walked into the office of Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and said 5 words, "Sir, you need to see this." Secretary Austin watched the video for 30 seconds. Then he said, "Get me the Attorney General, get me the FBI, and get me whoever commands that police department. Now." At 3:06 p.m., while Pritchard and Sutherland were still filling out paperwork in the Walmart manager's office, still believing they'd followed protocol, still thinking the body cams would protect them, the Secretary of Defense was on a conference call with the Attorney General, the Director of the FBI, and the commander of Army Special Operations Command. The call lasted 4 minutes. At 3:09 p.m., the FBI field office in Charlotte received orders to dispatch agents immediately to Fayetteville. At 3:11 p.m., the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division opened an investigation file. At 3:12 p.m., exactly 18 minutes after Major Langston Beaumont was pepper-sprayed in a Walmart toy aisle, the Secretary of Defense authorized a public statement. It went out on official Department of Defense channels at 3:14 p.m. The Department of Defense is aware of an incident involving the assault of an active-duty Army officer by local law enforcement. We are working with the Department of Justice to investigate this matter. The assault of a commissioned officer in uniform is a federal offense. We will pursue all available legal remedies. Statement was unprecedented. The Secretary of Defense doesn't comment on local police incidents, ever, unless it's bad. Unless it's really, really bad. The statement hit the news wires at 3:16 p.m. by 3:20 p.m. CNN had picked it up. By 3:25 p.m. it was the lead story on MSNBC. By 3:30 p.m. Fox News was running it with the chyron, DOD, Army officer assaulted by police. At 3:33 p.m. Fayetteville Police Chief Raymond Delvecchio's phone rang. It was the mayor. The mayor's exact words were, "What the hell is happening at Walmart?" Chief Delvecchio pulled up the live stream, still going now at 89,000 viewers, and felt the floor drop out from under him. At 3:35 p.m. he called Pritchard's radio. Unit 47, return to station immediately. Bring the subject with you. Do not, I repeat, do not file charges. Release him to medical and get back here. Now. But it was too late for damage control. At 3:40 p.m. Major Beaumont was in the back of an ambulance, eyes still streaming, lungs still burning, uniform still stained. A paramedic was flushing his eyes with saline. Yuki Nakamura, the store manager, sat beside him holding a cold compress. She kept saying, I'm so sorry this happened. Beaumont couldn't respond. His throat was too raw. At 3:42 p.m., Colonel Voss finally ended her live stream. Final viewer count, 127,000. Total shares across all platforms, 340,000. The video had been screen recorded and uploaded 1,200 times. It was now permanently part of the internet. She walked to the ambulance and knocked on the door. Beaumont, I'm Colonel Patricia Voss, JAG Corps. I documented everything. I'm a witness. And I want you to know the Pentagon already knows. The Secretary of Defense already knows. This is already a federal case. Beaumont nodded weakly, unable to speak. Voss handed her business card to the paramedic. Make sure he gets this. Tell him to call me when he's ready. I'm testifying. Pro bono. At 3:50 p.m., Pritchard and Sutherland walked into the police station. They were smiling, joking. They'd just had an exciting shift. They'd made a good arrest, or so they thought. Chief Delvecchio met them at the door. My office. Now don't say a word to anyone. Tone made them stop smiling. At 4:02 p.m., after watching the body cam footage and the live stream side by side, Chief Delvecchio said, You're both suspended without pay, effective immediately. Turn in your badges, your weapons, and your body cams. Do not speak to the press. Do not speak to anyone. Get a lawyer, both of you. Pritchard's face went white. Chief, what? You just assaulted a Special Forces major on camera in front of 127,000 people. The Secretary of Defense issued a statement. The FBI is already en route. You're both done. Get out of my station. At 4:15 p.m. Major Langston Beaumont's wife, Captain Jalissa Beaumont, received a call from Fort Bragg's Casualty Assistance Office. Not because he was dead, but because the military activates casualty protocols for assaults on service members by civilians. She was told what happened. She was told where he was. She was told he was safe. She arrived at the hospital at 4:40 p.m. and found her husband sitting on an examination table, eyes red, face swollen, uniform destroyed. She didn't cry. She was military too. She went into operational mode. Did they charge you with anything? No. You sign anything? No. We're getting a lawyer. The best one we can find. At 5:00 p.m., their 7-year-old daughter Amara was at a neighbor's house, wondering why her birthday party was delayed. At 5:30 p.m., the Joint Chiefs of Staff issued their own statement. Another unprecedented move. The men and women of the United States Armed Forces serve with honor and distinction. They deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, both in combat and at home. We stand with Major Beaumont. At 6:00 p.m., the Fayetteville City Council held an emergency closed session. At 7:00 p.m., Pritchard and Sutherland were each served with federal subpoenas at their homes. At 8:00 p.m., Major Beaumont finally made it home. His daughter ran to him, stopped, saw his face, and burst into tears. "Daddy, what happened to your eyes?" He knelt down, pulled her close, and lied for the first time in his life. "I'm okay, baby, just a little accident, nothing to worry about." But she knew. Kids always know. At 9:00 p.m., the livestream had been viewed 2.4 million times across all platforms. At 10:00 p.m., Major Beaumont sat on his couch, his wife beside him, and watched himself get pepper sprayed on the evening news. CNN, MSNBC, Fox. All of them running the same clip. All of them calling it what it was, a racist assault on a decorated soldier. At 11:00 p.m., he turned off the TV and sat in the dark. At midnight, he finally took off the uniform, the one he'd been so proud to wear that morning, the one that was supposed to mean something, the one that was supposed to protect him. He folded it carefully, ribbons out, and placed it on the dresser. He didn't know it yet, but that uniform would never be worn again, because in 6 months, it would be encased in glass at the U.S. Army Special Operations Museum, with a plaque beneath it that would read, "Valor cannot be stolen, but dignity must be defended." But that night, all Major Langston Beaumont knew was that the uniform hadn't protected him, and he wondered, for the first time in his career, what the uniform was even for. The Provost Marshal's office at Fort Bragg doesn't usually operate on Saturdays, but at 7:42 a.m. the morning after the assault, Colonel James Pritchett was at his desk, on his 4th cup of coffee, staring at a screen full of emails marked urgent. One was from the Office of the Secretary of Defense. One was from Army CID, Criminal Investigation Command. One was from the FBI's Charlotte Field Office. One was from the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. And one, marked with the highest priority flag he'd ever seen, was from the White House. The subject line, "Assault on Major Beaumont Presidential Inquiry." He opened it. The email was brief. "The President has been briefed on the incident involving Major Langston Beaumont. This matter is being treated as a priority civil rights investigation. Full cooperation with federal authorities is expected and required. Any obstruction will be reported directly to the Oval Office." Colonel Pritchett read it twice, then picked up his phone and called his boss, the commanding general of Fort Bragg. The general answered on the first ring. "I saw the email. I'm already on my way in." They met in the general's office at 8:15 a.m. "Bad is this?" the general asked. "Sir, it's worse than bad. The video has been viewed over 4 million times. The FBI opened a civil rights investigation last night. DOJ is sending prosecutors. And the Secretary of Defense personally called the Fayetteville mayor at 10 p.m. last night and told him that if those officers aren't charged, the federal government will prosecute them anyway." General leaned back in his chair. "What do we know about Beaumont?" "He's clean, sir. Spotless record. 2 combat deployments. Bronze Star with Valor, Purple Heart. He was at a promotion ceremony yesterday before this happened. He's one of ours, 3rd Group. Good soldier, good officer, family man." The cops. Pritchard has 3 excessive force complaints, all cleared by Internal Affairs. Sutherland has a clean file, but he was Pritchard's partner on all 3 incidents. Bodycam footage shows clear racial bias. Pritchard's personal Facebook has posts in a group that targets minority service members for stolen valor accusations. CID already pulled his social media. "It's bad, sir, really bad," General swore under his breath. "Where's Beaumont now?" "Home with his family. Medical cleared him last night. Chemical burns to the eyes and face. No permanent damage, but sir, his daughter's birthday party was supposed to be yesterday. He missed it because he was in the ER getting treated for pepper spray burns." General closed his eyes. "A 7-year-old's birthday party?" "Yes, sir. Christ." At 9:00 a.m., 2 FBI agents arrived at Fort Bragg to interview Major Beaumont. At 9:30 a.m., the Fayetteville Police Department's Internal Affairs Division began reviewing Pritchard's entire employment history. At 10:00 a.m. they found something, a complaint filed 6 months earlier. A Hispanic Marine, Corporal Luis Herrera, shopping at the same Walmart in his dress blues, stopped by Pritchard, questioned, accused of wearing a fake uniform. The Marine provided his military ID. Pritchard didn't believe him, called the Marine's command to verify. The command verified angrily and filed a formal complaint with the police department. The complaint never went anywhere. It was reviewed by Pritchard's supervisor, Lieutenant Carson Wade, who wrote in his assessment, Officer Pritchard was performing due diligence in preventing stolen valor fraud. No policy violation found. Complaint closed. But now with federal investigators involved, that buried complaint was Exhibit BAT 10:30 a.m. Internal Affairs pulled bodycam footage from the Corporal Herrera incident. On the video, clear as day, Pritchard says to Sutherland, "I don't buy it. Guys like him don't make corporal. Probably bought that uniform at a surplus store. Guys like him." The investigator paused the video, rewound it, played it again, then he picked up the phone and called the chief. "Sir, we have a pattern." At 11:00 a.m., the Fayetteville City Attorney was on a conference call with the mayor, the police chief, and outside counsel. Outside counsel's advice was clear: settle immediately before this becomes a trial, because if this goes to trial, the city will lose badly and the damages will be catastrophic. The mayor asked, "How much are we talking? Best case, $2 million, worst case, $10 million, and that's before punitive damages." At 11:30 a.m., the Fayetteville City Council held an emergency meeting. At 12:00 p.m., they voted unanimously to authorize settlement negotiations. At 12:15 p.m., Major Beaumont received a call from a law firm in Raleigh. They specialized in civil rights cases. They'd seen the video. They wanted to represent him. Pro bono. He said yes. At 1:00 p.m., the Attorney General of North Carolina issued a statement. "My office is monitoring the situation in Fayetteville. We are prepared to pursue state criminal charges if local authorities fail to act." At 2:00 p.m., Pritchard and Sutherland were formally terminated. At 2:30 p.m., the North Carolina Criminal Justice Standards Commission opened proceedings to permanently revoke their law enforcement certifications. At 3:00 p.m., a federal grand jury in the Eastern District of North Carolina was convened. At 4:00 p.m., Pritchard and Sutherland were each indicted on 3 federal charges. Deprivation of rights under color of law, Title 18, U.S.C. Section 242. Assault of a commissioned military officer, Title 18, U.S.C. Section 1389. Filing a false police report, Title 18, U.S.C. Section 1001. Maximum combined sentence, 23 years in federal prison. At 5:00 p.m., U.S. Marshals arrested both men at their homes. The perp walk footage aired on every major news network that night. At 6:00 p.m., Major Beaumont sat in his living room, watching the arrests on TV. His daughter was in her room, finally having the birthday party that had been delayed. Her friends were there. Cake was being served. She was smiling again. But Beaumont couldn't stop thinking about the moment Pritchard raised the pepper spray, the look in his eyes, the certainty, the absolute conviction that a black man in uniform couldn't be real. His wife sat beside him. "You okay?" "No, you will be." "Will I?" She took his hand. "We'll make sure of it." At 8:00 p.m., the settlement negotiations began. At 10:00 p.m., they ended. The city's opening offer, $1.2 million. Beaumont's attorney's response: "We'll see you in court." Negotiations resumed the next morning. By the end of the week, the number was $4.9 million, the largest civil rights settlement in North Carolina state history. But the money wasn't the point. The point was the reforms. The settlement included mandatory provisions. Federal oversight of the Fayetteville Police Department for 5 years. Mandatory implicit bias training for all officers. Body cam footage review by independent civilian auditors. A public apology from the chief of police. A memorial plaque at the Walmart honoring Major Beaumont. And one more thing, Major Beaumont requested that his dress uniform, the one he wore that day, the one stained with pepper spray and floor dust, be donated to the U.S. Army Special Operations Museum, not hidden away, displayed, with a plaque, so that every soldier, every officer, every person who walked through that museum would see it and remember, valor cannot be stolen, but dignity must be defended. The investigation took 6 weeks. What they found was worse than anyone expected. Internal Affairs reviewed every body cam video, every incident report, every complaint filed against Pritchard and Sutherland over the past 8 years. They found 11 incidents where Pritchard questioned the credentials of service members. 9 of them were people of color. They found the Facebook group, Valor Guardians, 847 members. Pritchard had been a moderator. His posts were public. Screenshots were taken, archived, sent to federal prosecutors. One post from 2 years ago stopped another fake today. Black guy in navy dress blues, couldn't name his ship. Turned out he was real, but he looked nervous, so I was right to check. Another from 8 months ago. These people think they can just put on a uniform and get respect. Not on my watch. The comments beneath were worse. Keep up the good work, brother. Real heroes don't look like that. Someone's gotta protect the uniform. They found private messages between Pritchard and Sutherland. One from the day of the assault, sent at 1:47 p.m., exactly 1 hour before the incident. Pritchard, heading to Walmart. Wanna roll, Sutherland? Yeah, might get lucky and catch some stolen valor, Pritchard. Lol, let's hope. The federal prosecutor read that message 3 times, then highlighted it in yellow and marked it. Exhibit A, premeditation. They found Lieutenant Carson Wade's evaluation reports. Ones where he'd noted Pritchard's aggressive tendencies. The ones where he'd recommended additional training. The ones where, despite those recommendations, he'd still rated Pritchard as meets standards every single year. Lieutenant Wade was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. They found the Corporal Herrera complaint. The one that had been buried. The one that, if properly investigated, might have prevented the assault on Major Beaumont. The body cam footage from that incident was damning. Pritchard, I don't believe you're a real Marine. Corporal Herrera, sir, I just showed you my military ID. Pritchard, IDs can be faked. Sutherland, off camera, think he bought that uniform online. Pritchard, probably. Investigator noted the timestamps. The Herrera incident happened at 2:34 p.m. on a Saturday. The Beaumont incident happened at 2:47 p.m. on a Saturday, both at the same Walmart, both in uniform, both stopped without probable cause. The pattern was undeniable. At the federal courthouse, the grand jury heard testimony from Major Langston Beaumont, Colonel Patricia Voss, Corporal Louis Herrera, Yuki Nakamura, the Walmart manager, 17 civilian witnesses who'd recorded the assault, 3 expert witnesses on implicit bias and racial profiling, 2 former Fayetteville police officers who testified that Pritchard had a reputation for targeting minority service members. The grand jury deliberated for 47 minutes. They returned indictments on all charges. Pritchard and Sutherland's lawyers tried to negotiate a plea deal. The prosecution's offer, 18 months in federal prison, permanent revocation of law enforcement certifications, and a public apology. Pritchard refused. I was doing my job, he told his lawyer. That guy looked suspicious. I don't care what the video shows, I know what I saw. His lawyer tried to explain that what he saw was a decorated army officer shopping for his daughter's birthday, and what the jury would see was a racist assault captured on 17 different cameras. Pritchard didn't listen. The trial was set for 9 months later, but it never happened, because 3 weeks before the trial, Pritchard's lawyer sat him down and showed him something, a jury consultant's report. The consultant had conducted mock trials with 6 different jury pools, all in North Carolina. All demographically similar to the actual jury pool, all 6 juries convicted on all counts. Average deliberation time, 2.3 hours. Average sentence recommendation, 8-12 years. One juror quote recorded in the mock trial, he pepper-sprayed a war hero for shopping. I don't care what excuses he has, that's evil. Pritchard's lawyer slid the report across the table. Take the plea, or spend the next decade in federal prison, your choice. Pritchard took the plea. Who did Sutherland? Sentencing was scheduled for 2 months later. Chapter 7 on a cold Thursday morning in November, 8 months after the assault, Pritchard and Sutherland stood in federal court for sentencing. The courtroom was packed. Major Beaumont sat in the front row in full dress uniform. His wife beside him, his daughter at home with family too young to see this. Behind them, 17 soldiers from 3rd Special Forces Group, all in uniform, all sitting at attention, silent, unmoving. A wall of witnesses. The judge, the Honorable Catherine Morland, was a 30-year veteran of the federal bench. She'd seen everything, but she'd never seen a case quite like this. She read the charges, read the plea agreements. Then she asked if either defendant wanted to make a statement. Pritchard stood. Your Honor, I want to say I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I should have handled things differently. It was the most hollow apology Judge Morland had ever heard. She looked at him over her reading glasses. Mr. Pritchard, you didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to see a black man in uniform and assume he was a criminal. You chose to ignore his identification. You chose to ignore his offers of verification. You chose to deploy a chemical weapon against a decorated soldier who was shopping for his daughter's birthday. That's not a mistake. That's a moral failure. Pritchard opened his mouth to respond. His lawyer grabbed his arm and pulled him back down. Judge Morland turned to the prosecution. Does the victim wish to make a statement? Major Beaumont stood. He walked to the podium, adjusted the microphone, looked directly at Pritchard and Sutherland. I joined the army when I was 19 years old. I joined because I believed in something bigger than myself. I believed that the uniform meant something, that it represented service, sacrifice, honor. I've served in combat zones. I've led soldiers through firefights. I've lost friends. I've bled for this country. I've done it proudly. His voice was steady, controlled, but there was an edge beneath it. Months ago, I was shopping for my daughter's birthday party. I was in uniform because I'd just come from a promotion ceremony. I was proud of that uniform, proud of what it represented. And then 2 police officers decided that I didn't deserve to wear it because of my skin color, because they couldn't imagine that someone who looks like me could be a real soldier. He paused. They didn't just assault me. They assaulted every black service member who's ever put on a uniform. They assaulted the memory of every black soldier who died defending this country. They assaulted the idea that service and sacrifice are colorblind. Pritchard stared at the table. Sutherland wiped his eyes. My daughter asked me why those men hurt me. She's 7 years old, and I didn't have a good answer. Because the truth, that they hurt me because of the color of my skin, is too ugly for a 7-year-old to understand. Beaumont's hands gripped the podium. I don't want revenge. I want accountability. I want these men to understand what they did. Not just to me, but to every service member of color who now has to wonder if the uniform will protect them or paint a target on their back. He stepped back. Thank you, Your Honor, Judge Morland nodded. Then she delivered her sentence. Mr. Pritchard, Mr. Sutherland, you have pleaded guilty to federal civil rights violations. You have admitted to assaulting a commissioned officer. You have admitted to filing false reports. The plea agreement calls for 18 months in federal prison. I am accepting that agreement. But I want to be clear, this sentence is a gift. A gift you do not deserve. If this had gone to trial, and if the jury had convicted you, I would have sentenced you to the maximum. 8 years, maybe more. She looked at them both. You wore badges. You were given authority. You were trusted to protect and serve. And you betrayed that trust in the most fundamental way possible. You saw a man who had sacrificed more for this country than you ever will, and you treated him like a criminal, not because of anything he did, but because of who he is. Her voice hardened. You will serve 18 months in federal prison. Upon release, you will be on supervised probation for 3 years. Your law enforcement certifications have been permanently revoked. You will never wear a badge again. You will never carry a gun for law enforcement again. You will never have authority over another human being again. You will each issue a public written apology to Major Beaumont and to every service member you have harmed through your actions. She banged her gavel. This court is adjourned. Marshals led Pritchard and Sutherland out of the courtroom in handcuffs. As they passed Major Beaumont, Pritchard looked at him just for a second. And in that second there was something, not quite remorse, not quite understanding, but maybe the beginning of recognition that he destroyed not just Beaumont's day, but his own entire life. Outside the courthouse, Major Beaumont stood on the steps with his lawyer and Colonel Voss. Reporters shouted questions. Beaumont, how do you feel about the sentence? Are you satisfied with the outcome? What message does this send? Beaumont raised a hand. The crowd quieted. Justice was served today, not because 2 men are going to prison, but because the system this time worked. The truth came out. The evidence was heard, and accountability was delivered. That doesn't happen every time. For too many people, especially people of color, the system fails. So I'm grateful, but I'm also aware that I was lucky. Lucky that 17 people recorded what happened. Lucky that a JAG officer was there to live stream. Lucky that the Pentagon intervened. Not everyone gets that lucky. He paused. This case is over. But the fight isn't. We need police reform. We need accountability. We need a system where a black man in uniform isn't automatically suspicious. Where service is respected, regardless of skin color. That's the work that remains. A reporter called out, "What happens now for you?" Beaumont smiled, a real smile, the first one in months. "I'm going home. I'm going to hug my daughter. And then I'm going back to work, because I'm still a soldier, and I still believe in the uniform. Even if it didn't protect me that day, I still believe in what it represents." He walked down the steps. His wife took his hand. Behind them, 17 Green Berets followed in formation. Chapter 8. 6 weeks later, on a Saturday morning, Major Langston Beaumont stood in the parking lot outside the U.S. Army Special Operations Museum at Fort Bragg. He was in dress uniform. Not the one from that day. That one was inside the museum now, behind glass, but a new one. Crisp, clean, Ribbons polished, shoes shined. His wife was beside him. His daughter, Amara, was holding his hand. She was wearing a new dress. Yellow, her favorite color. Are you ready? His wife asked. I think so. They walked inside. The museum was closed to the public for the day. This was a private ceremony, but the room was full. 3-star generals, colonels, sergeant majors, soldiers from 3rd Group, and in the front row a surprise guest, the Secretary of the Army. The ceremony began at 10:00 a.m. The museum director spoke first. She explained the history of the exhibit. How Major Beaumont's uniform had become a symbol, not just of injustice, but of resilience, of dignity, of the reality that black service members have always faced dual battles, one against foreign enemies and one against racism at home. Then the Secretary of the Army stood. Major Beaumont, you've served this nation with distinction for over 12 years. You've led soldiers in combat. You've earned medals for valor. You've sacrificed for your country in ways most Americans will never understand. And then 8 months ago, you were assaulted for wearing the uniform you earned, not by an enemy combatant, not in a war zone, but in a Walmart, by the very people who are supposed to protect American citizens. He paused. What happened to you was wrong. It was illegal. It was immoral. And it was, sadly, not unique, but your response was unique. You didn't lash out. You didn't lose your composure. You maintained your dignity. You trusted the system. And because of your courage, 2 officers who abused their authority are now in federal prison. Because of your courage, a police department is under federal oversight. Because of your courage, reforms are being implemented. You didn't just seek justice for yourself. You sought it for every service member who might face what you faced. Secretary of the Army stepped forward and handed Beaumont a framed certificate. On behalf of the President of the United States and the United States Army, I present you with the Secretary of the Army Award for Valor, not for actions in combat, but for actions at home, for courage under assault, for dignity under fire, for being in every sense of the word a soldier. Room erupted in applause. Amara squeezed her father's hand. Daddy, are you famous? He knelt down. No, baby, I'm just a soldier. Everyone's clapping for you. They're clapping for what the uniform represents, not for me. Don't understand, he thought for a moment. You know how you have rules at school, rules that make sure everyone is treated fairly? She nodded. Sometimes grown-ups break those rules, and when they do, other grown-ups have to make sure there are consequences. That's what happened. Some people broke the rules, and I helped make sure they faced consequences, that's all. She hugged him. I'm glad those bad men can't hurt anyone else. Me too, baby, me too. After the ceremony, Beaumont walked to the new exhibit. There behind glass was his uniform, the one from that day. The stains were still visible. The chemical residue, the floor dust, the wrinkles from being slammed into the tile, the ribbons slightly askew, beneath it a plaque.